Hello, it's LudoNarraCon. Hi, everybody. I am Rebekah Valentine. I am a reporter with IGN. But right now, I am not doing reporting. I am instead doing conversing via a fireside chat. This is Ron Gilbert, everybody. I don't know, I guess gesturing whichever way I should be gesturing. Ron Gilbert, you probably know from many, many things, best known for work on the first two Monkey Islands, Maniac Mansion, my personal favorite of the collection, Thimbleweed Park, most recently Return to Monkey Island, just tons and tons of things. Ron, how do you introduce yourself these days? Like what are the highlights that you tell people when you're showing off your career?
Oh, I never know, you know. It's like I usually let other people do it, right? Because I've had to like introduce myself in some video casts, and I just hate it because it feels like I'm just bragging at that point. You know, it's like look at me, look at my stuff. So I'm happier when other people introduce me.
Yeah, that's a safe bet. But I feel like you have a lot to brag about, though. I mean, you've been doing this since like the 80s, is that right? And you've made like many games.
Yeah, my first real job making games was in 1985.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I'm not going to tell you what I was doing in 1985.
Yeah, don't tell me. It will just depress me for the rest of the day.
I'm sorry. That's like a pretty good place to start. I feel like there's a lot of different places we could go with this. But you know, we're doing LudoNarraCon, so we're talking maybe a little bit about like video game stories. And you have been a prolific storyteller, and I think it's, especially since you recently revisited one of your earlier creations, Monkey Island, I imagine video game storytelling has probably changed like pretty dramatically over your time in this industry. Is that something you think about?
Yeah, it has, and it hasn't, right? It's, you know, when the first narrative game I built was, of course, Maniac Mansion, right? The games that I built before that really weren't narrative games per se, but Maniac Mansion was the first one that I had done that was a narrative game, and at some level, not much has really changed, right? Graphics are a lot better, and, you know, the way we interact with them could be a lot more sophisticated. But at its core, it's about storytelling. I mean, storytelling has been around for thousands of years. So you're really leveraging, hopefully you're leveraging on your kind of basic storytelling knowledge as opposed to your computer storytelling knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at least in terms of audience, like as someone who plays games and does not make them, I think at least audience expectations for story out of video games have become, oh, I don't know, more serious, right? Like we want more out of the stories our games tell us. It's not enough to just have like, you know, a game of Pong or something. People like narrative, people like stories, and they care about them being told, and told well, and told deeply.
Yeah, I think that is one of the more interesting things about you know, more current modern games is, you know, games like Maniac Mansion and Monkey Island, you know, those weren't serious stories, right? They were fun stories. There were kind of elements where we touched on some serious stuff, but they really weren't, you know, serious stories. And I think now you can have games that are about more serious stories, right? They don't have to be essentially cartoons, right? They can be really interesting stuff. Like I just played South of the Circle recently.
Yeah.
And you know, that's a very interesting, somewhat serious story, right? There's not a lot of laughs in it. It doesn't feel like it's a cartoon. So I think we have, you know, more games like that, I think is a good thing.
Yeah. Does that, I mean, I guess, does that challenge how you approach your work any? Since, you know, you do have quite a bit more of a playful side to yours.
Yeah, I couldn't tell a serious story. You know, it's like I've tried to kind of write, you know, drama, write serious stuff, and 5 minutes into my writing, it's turned into a comedy. You know, it can be like a dark comedy, but it's just, I think anything I do just has to be. It's the way I kind of naturally flow to stuff, is looking at the comedic elements of it. And that's not to say things aren't serious. Like if you look at the story of Return to Monkey Island, yeah, it's a very funny game. It's a very funny story, but there is a very serious kind of undertone to the story with Guybrush and his son and all this stuff. So I like to kind of touch on serious themes, but I don't think I could ever write a totally serious story.
Do you feel you have more tools to be more playful now than you necessarily did like in the 80s and 90s? Like I feel that there might be more ways for games to be comedic, I guess, with game development technology having progressed the way that it has.
Yeah, well, the big thing is voice acting.
Oh yeah,
we didn't have voice acting, for Maniac Mansion or Monkey Island 2.
yeah.
So
Return does,
that is a whole different layer that you have, because now you can have real actors that are adding to the comedy of the scene that they're recording. So that's a big change. And just art in general. We're not dealing with small little pixelated characters that are 16 pixels tall. We can have a lot more expression going on in the characters, a lot more animation can be happening in them, and those are great ways. And of course, I think 3D. There are games, like Firewatch was the first real adventure game that I played that was all in 3D, and that was very, very interesting to watch. Understanding how actually moving through an environment can affect the story, as opposed to games, 2D type adventure games.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can just like dig right into Return to Monkey Island if you like. I mean, that was one of the, you mentioned the art. I mean, that was one of the big decisions that I noticed that you all made with Monkey Island that I think was pretty widely talked about, was the decision to move away from sort of this older artistic style to a newer one. And that's tough. That must have been a really tough decision to sort of embrace.
Yeah, it really was, because when I started talking to Dave Grossman about the project, one of the first things that I wanted to talk to him about was, do we do pixel art? And we make this a real kind of retro game? Is this an actual follow-on to Monkey Island 2?
Because that is something you could have done. I mean, we have like lots of examples of like really lovely, more modernized pixel art out there right now.
Totally could have done that. And I mean, personally, I love pixel art. I like pixel art, and I kind of gravitate towards it in a lot of ways. But with Monkey Island, I really wanted to make a game that wasn't just a nostalgia play, right? It wasn't a, hey, here's the third game like it would have been back in 1991. And I think the moving beyond the pixel art stuff, going into more kind of sophisticated art and animation, that we had those tools available to us. There's a lot you can really do with that. And so that was, really, there was a decision there. There was also that decision that I didn't want it to just be a nostalgia play. And I think had it been pixel art, that's all it really would have been for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I've read some of the other interviews that you've done about Return to Monkey Island, and I think very specifically not wanting it to just be a nostalgia play is like a really interesting thing to hear from somebody who, like, you very clearly wanted to revisit this series for a very, very long time. Like Monkey Island 2 kind of left some unfinished business on the table, and like it's very clear that you've had ideas for what you wanted to do with this story for a very long time. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was the third one. I'd always envisioned Monkey Island as a trilogy of games, right? There's Monkey Island 1, 2, and then my 3, not the actual Monkey Island 3. And so I kind of envisioned that, and there was a little bit of discussion when Return to Monkey Island came out about, should we actually make the game I would have made back then as Monkey Island 3? And I think that was discarded like within 2 minutes of conversation, because a lot of the things that I wanted the game to be back then have already been done by other Monkey Island games. Not that they were ripping me off; they had no idea what I was doing, but just kind of natural things.
Can I ask for examples? Is that allowed?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at LeChuck, right? He's the ghost pirate LeChuck in Monkey Island 1. He's the demon or the zombie pirate in Monkey Island 2. And in my Monkey Island 3, he was going to be the demon pirate LeChuck. Because in my story, a lot of the story took place in hell, because Guybrush was in hell and Stan was there, and there was the demon pirate LeChuck. But they did the Demon Pirate LeChuck in, Curse of Monkey Island, and not that they were ripping me off at all, but I couldn't really do that. I felt like if I actually made the game I wanted to make, people would have thought, oh, well, you're just ripping off Tales of Monkey Island, you're ripping off this game, even though the idea was completely original at the time. And I think the other thing that really kind of convinced me to do Return to Monkey Island was having something to say, right? I didn't want to make just another Monkey Island game, right? We've seen those before. I wanted to make sure that I really had something to say about the game. And the game really does talk in some ways about nostalgia, right? It's Guybrush's nostalgia, for his life as a pirate. And, you've got Boy Brush, and, in some ways, he represents more of the modern gamer who kind of has this weird view of the past, and so it was really about, do I have something to say? And I thought after spending the weekend with Dave Grossman and kind of hashing this out, I realized, yeah, you know what, we actually do have something interesting to say here. So I decided to do the project.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of art right now that's sort of reckoning with the idea of nostalgia and what it means. I mean, we have a whole lot of revivals of things that were popular in the 80s, 90s, and even like early 2000s across TV and movies, and now games as well. Like there's all these remasters and things coming out. But then there's also media that is doing like sort of a revisitation of these worlds in the same way that Return to Monkey Island does, that's examining what it actually means to go back and look at something that you once loved and like learn to love it again for new reasons. Did you ever see the Rocko's Modern Life special by chance?
No, I did not.
No, it was this. I mean, it was a similar thing where it's this 90s cartoon where they did like one special episode, basically like that was meant. It was kind of like teasing a revival, but then what it actually was this deep examination of what it means to be nostalgic for something and what it means to hold on to your childhood or move past it. And I thought that was really, and some of the same themes it sounds like you're playing with here.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, nostalgia is weird, right? Because you think about playing games in your past, whether it's people playing Monkey Island 1, which a lot of people were 10 years old when they played Monkey Island 1.
Yeah.
And realizing that your memories are not perfect.
Yeah.
And what you think you were playing back then is really not actually what you were playing.
Oh yeah.
And a little bit like Boy Brush is kind of that. The way he kind of morphs and twists Guybrush stories around is kind of the player in some ways. The way that they kind of view nostalgia with that stuff. And I think with any game where you're doing a remake or so, the thing that's important to me is that the new game has something new to say. Like I'm really not a fan of just remasters, because especially when you can already play the game, and just bumping up the art fidelity or adding voice or so. I'm not a fan of that, because you're not telling me anything new. You're taking this game and I want you to tell me something new. So I'm more interested in games that where, like Return to Monkey Island, they are kind of revisiting something but in a completely new way. And to me, that's important whenever you're doing that kind of stuff.
I realize I'm probably putting you in a corner a little bit here, but like, do you feel that you have said all that you want to say through Monkey Island, or is there like a chance you may open that book again someday in the future?
Yeah, it's something that I've certainly talked about, and I think it would get back to what I was saying, earlier, which is if I have something to say, right? I don't want to make just another Monkey Island game. Here's Guybrush, he's battling LeChuck, and there's Elaine, and and that's been done over and over and over again. And if I had something absolutely new to say about the whole thing, then it would probably be interesting to do. I don't know what that is right now.
No, that makes sense. A little bit ago, we were talking about kind of the art and some of the other new things, and you mentioned the voice acting. And how are you thinking about that as you were writing Return to Monkey Island? Like, did you know that you were going to have these things voice acted? Did that change how you approached things, or what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely knew we were going to do voice acting. I think it would be hard to release a Monkey Island game without voice acting, right? Especially since you had all the previous games, 3 and 4 and 5 and stuff were all voice acted. So I knew from day one we were doing voice acting. Um, and I think the thing is writing is a little bit different, right? If you're writing something to be read, like Monkey Island Monkey 2 were, versus if you're writing something to be spoken, right? You just write a little bit differently. There were a lot of cases during the production of the game where we would get kind of bugs back from the testers correcting our grammar, right? That saying, well, the grammar isn't right here. And it's like, yeah, it's not right, but this is meant to be spoken, right? And so when it's spoken, it will sound more natural. It'll sound the way people speak, not the way that they write. And so that was definitely something we had to kind of look out for, was the writing in the voiceover stuff.
Yeah. How were you thinking about finding voices for these characters? Because I mean, Guybrush especially, like I had kind of a weird journey to Monkey Island because I didn't play any of them until Return to Monkey Island, and then I revisited the original like fairly recently in my life. But I think maybe not most, but a lot of people played those games forever ago and maybe had like a voice in their head for like these characters that they've known, and that must be fairly hard to capture.
Yeah, I mean, that's always hard, right? With Thimbleweed Park, I knew it was going to be voiced from the beginning, and there were not pre-existing voices. But anytime you're writing, you're kind of imagining this voice in your head, right? You're kind of saying, well, this is what this character is going to sound like. This is the way they're going to speak. Then you go into the studio and you're doing auditions, and then everything is just thrown out the door because you thought this character sounded this way, and then you hear an audition and you're like, oh, I really like that. So that process kind of happens with any game that you're doing. With Return to Monkey Island, it was a little bit different because there were a lot of actors that had worked in the previous games. Like we knew Dominic Amardo was going to be Guybrush, right? And so anytime we're writing Guybrush, that is the voice that's in my head. Is Dominic.
Yeah, that's true.
And same with a lot of the other actors and stuff. And we tried to get as many of the actors back as we could. Some of them weren't available.
Yeah, and been what 10 years at that point since.
Yeah, that's right. Probably a little over 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we tried to get as many people back as we could. And we tried to, when we had to recast somebody, we very purposely didn't look for sound-alikes, right? I didn't want to get somebody and say, I want you to sound like this person, because we wanted the actors to have their take on the character, right? And we didn't want to change the character with the voice acting, but we also wanted to give the actor the freedom to be able to do what they do with the character. And if that meant changing the character a little, then so be it.
Yeah, so that was going to be my next question. Did working with voice actors end up influencing the script kind of like in reverse in any significant ways?
Not significantly. It's like when the voice acting is happening, either Dave or I was always in one of the sessions. And sometimes the actor would say something not like we wrote it, but we liked the way they said it. So we just go change the script a little bit to kind of match what they had said. But I don't think that happened a lot. And the actors are very good with that stuff, and they're not off, riffing on the script. It's not an improv thing. So they're pretty good at sticking to the script, but sometimes they would just have a better way of saying things. Often, Dominic would stop the session and go, I don't think Guybrush would say this. I think he would say it like this. And we're like, yeah, okay, that sounds great. Do that.
Yeah. So kind of circling back to like how the ways in which you might work or might make a game have changed over the years. Like, internally, do you feel that things have changed in terms of the ways that you work with other people? Like, I I'm not sure exactly what the developmental timeline on Return to Monkey Island was, but I assume at least part of it was being worked on during the pandemic. Like, you know, collaborative work has changed a little bit. Like how is writing stories like that happening now as opposed to how it was back when you started?
I think if I look at Monkey Island and Monkey Island 1 and 2 as an example, right, those were very much improv games. You know, I had an outline of where I wanted to go with things, and an outline of like places and puzzles and characters. But then the actual process of building it, whether it was Steve Purcell doing art or Tim and Dave doing writing, there was this kind of improv element to it. And I always liked it because we could go out and have lunch together, and if we laughed about something, it was in the game that afternoon. You know, we could just iterate that quickly, and that's a little different today because you know art is such a production now, and it takes a long time to do things. We can't just on an impulse change the way something exists in a room of the game. So I think there's less of that kind of improv development that we had in those days.
Yeah, you're actually not the first or even the second game developer to mention like improv influences and concepts to me in the last couple months. I'm kind of surprised like how much influence that has. Is that like a conscious thing? Is that like something that you're aware of as like a school of thought that you ascribe to, or is it just so you just show up and talk things through?
Yeah, I think it's the way I like to do things, right? I have come across designers who write a 300-page design document before they start their game. And that would drive me crazy, right? I do a 3-page design document before I start my game. So, for me, working on a game is like feeling my way through it. And you just play it and you watch people play it and you work on it, you write it and you change it, and that's just kind of naturally the way that I like to work. It's a little bit different these days because of art is such a huge process. You can't just instantly change something like we could back in the day. Voice acting is an issue because there is a point where you have to lock down your script. You have to say, well, this is the script. And a lot of times that is months before the game ships because of the voice recording you have to do. Yeah. So things like that, they're a little bit different. They think rein in that kind of improv nature of doing stuff.
Do you feel that games are better, worse for it, or do you just kind of change the way you work to accommodate? Just generally, not your specific.
Yeah, I think you probably change. Like I don't think they're any worse. I mean, they're probably better in that they have a little more forethought, in what's actually happening. So I think it probably evens out across the board.
Yeah, I imagine it allows you to do a little more quality control on the things that you're writing, and I don't know that this was necessarily a factor in Monkey Island, but like at large, it's maybe a little easier to catch sort of things that maybe shouldn't be in there, or things that are a little silly or don't make sense, possibly.
But possibly.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, kind of along those lines. Like, have you? From what I know of you, like I feel like you've always worked pretty collaboratively with others. It's like the size of the teams that you work with now as opposed to back then changed at all? Like, are you still about as collaborative as you used to be?
Yeah, much larger teams. I still like to work very collaboratively. And, my philosophy, of leading a project is that a good idea can come from anywhere, right? And don't be afraid to grab it and stick in the game, no matter who came up with it. And I think I work best in that because I do like to kind of riff off of people and throw out ideas and see what the feedback is for them. And that was a lot easier when with Monkey 1 and Monkey 2 and the team was 5 or 6 people. But Return to Monkey Island was 25 people, and so it's a little bit harder to kind of get everybody involved. And we certainly did take ideas from anywhere. A lot of the testers would come up with really funny ideas for something, and so we go, oh yeah, that's funny, let's put that in the game. But that's a lot different than, you know, having the core team members all sit around a table and be able to riff on stuff. So we still like to pull ideas from anywhere. It's just a little bit harder. And everybody being remote is just having a Zoom call about
Yeah.
stuff is just not the same thing.
Yeah, it's really not. And again, you're not the first or the second or even the third person to tell me that, especially with regards to being able to hash out like story ideas and comedy as well too. Like it's just not the same when you're not in a room laughing with each other. And
Yeah.
I don't know that we found a good solution for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really true. There's a lot about working remotely I really like. You
Yes.
know, I like when I'm staffing up a game that I can hire anybody from anywhere in the world, right? I don't have to hire people that are willing to move to Seattle, right? I can just hire anybody. That I really like. I like working at home. I enjoy working at home, and I work well at home, so that's nice. But I do miss that kind of spontaneous collaboration that can happen from being in an office. I mean, during Return to Monkey Island, Dave Grossman and I met every single day. It's like every single day we would have like a 2 hour long, it was just voice, we didn't do video, but it was a 2 hour long call every single day where we would just talk about the game and talk about design and riff on stuff that we were doing. So, you know, we still kind of got that, but that's different than just walking into an artist's office and looking over their shoulder and go, "Ooh, that's funny. Ooh, more of that." It's just, yeah, it's just different.
Yeah, I certainly noticed that in like game discovery as well on my end. Like without regular conferences or anything, it's harder to just sort of walk around a show floor and say, "Ooh, what's that game? I've never seen that before." Like the digital showcase thing doesn't quite line up to that experience in the same way. Did you did aside from having those video calls, did you have any other way to mitigate that? Like, did you ever get together with the team at any point in person, or was there anything you could do?
Well, we got together with a lot of the team at PAX.
Yeah.
Because it just so happened that a couple of team members were going to be in Seattle for PAX. And that kind of started this floodgate of everybody on the team going, "Well, I want to come to Seattle." So we got a large chunk of the team together here in Seattle during PAX. But that was well after the game was done, right?
Yeah.
So that wasn't beforehand. But we were just really not able to because we were spread all over the world, and we had the stupid pandemic that was happening. So it was just not possible to get everyone together.
Yeah, I mean, you were in good company with everybody else in that situation, I guess.
Right,
Yeah. I wanted to kind of ask about how you feel about the sort of point and click adventure genre right now, because I know there's sort of like a general sense that we don't see a whole lot of games in that style anymore, and yet here you are embracing it to great success in, you know, the most recent years. So like how do you think about that genre right now? Do you still feel that it has weight and power and usefulness?
I think it does. I mean, obviously, I have a great fondness for the point and click, adventures. I do get a little discouraged sometimes with the number of point and click adventures that come out that are just replicating the Monkey Island or Maniac Mansion interface. Having those verbs at the bottom of the screen. That I think we need to move on from that.
Yeah, because that was a system you pioneered, right? And you
Maniac
moved on
Mansion.
from that like a long time ago. It's been a bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of came back to it for Thimbleweed Park, which
Sure.
Thimbleweed Park was interesting because that game was very purposely a nostalgia play.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole Kickstarter was about the nostalgia of that. So, we had to do things like the verb interface, but I think I would not have done that interface had it not been for the Kickstarter. That I would have tried, new things with the way the interface worked for the game. It may have been more like the Return to Monkey Island interface.
Wait, what about the Kickstarter prompted that?
It was just I think whenever you're doing a Kickstarter, you need a hook, right?
I see.
A hook or a gimmick. And that was just our hook. It was like you had discovered an old adventure game, that had been made in the 80s that you never played before. That was kind of the hook
Yeah.
for the whole thing. And so when we did that Kickstarter, that was what we did, and then we wanted to build a game that was was faithful to the Kickstarter, that did what we said in the Kickstarter.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've seen like a lot of really fascinating point and clicks in the indie scene lately. Just like some really interesting stuff, especially cropping up now that we have events again and I can walk past and go, oh, look at what's that. I've seen some really fascinating stuff lately, but it's also, again, like very relegated to small studios, small teams, which I guess is one of the benefits of it, right? Is that I don't want to say game development is easy by any stretch, but it is like one of the more accessible ways to make a game for a lot of people. But yeah, there's kind of like even a little bit of derision on the genre from the AAA space. I feel like sometimes. Do you get that, or am I making that up?
No, I think one of the things that's kind of exciting about games today versus games, when I started making them, is that there are so many people playing games these days.
Yeah.
That you can have niches that are actually viable markets.
Yeah.
And I think things like point and click games, they're a niche. I don't think adventure games are dead. I've never prescribed to that philosophy, but I do think they're a niche, right? They're not going to sell tens of millions of copies, like some AAA 3D game, but there's enough people that do like those things that you can actually do okay if that's your niche. Like
Yeah.
like Dave Gilbert, for example. He has found this niche for those games he makes, and he has an audience of people that like his games. And I think that's really good when the market is large enough and healthy enough that it can support strong niches of games.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that's absolutely where we are right now. I have definitely noticed that happening over the years in the adventure genre specifically. I mean, like adventure game means a bajillion different things now, where it used to mean one very specific thing. And like talking to folks like yourself who have sort of pioneered that genre. I mean, now some of the games that are classified rightfully as adventure games are almost unrecognizable, and it's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think some people would be hard pressed to say that Firewash was an adventure game,
Sure.
even though it is in my mind. And there was a point when the adventure games were all in text.
Yeah.
And then, people came out with graphics, and a whole bunch of people just hated that, right? There was just a firestorm of controversy because adventure games had graphics,
We've got Roberta Williams over here making Colossal Cave again, except now you can see it and run around in it.
Yeah, I think things just move on. And I think, if you're an artist in any genre, it's like you do need to kind of move forward with stuff and look at what you're doing and find new and interesting ways to kind of accomplish what you're doing. Like you can make a point and click adventure and still have it be a point and click adventure, but not have the 9 verbs at the bottom of the screen. And so I'm more interested in when I see point and click games where people are trying new and different things.
Yeah. Can I ask for examples? Like what are you looking at that's interesting right now?
Well, I mean, this game's been out for a while, but I really enjoyed Dropsy the Clown. I don't know if you played that. And that's very much a pixel game, and it's very much a point and click adventure game, but it's just doing some really interesting things with how you explore the world and how you were solving puzzles and how the puzzles were all connected together. I found that game very, very interesting, to play. And it was kind of, trying to do new and different things for that. The other game that I played recently was Later Alligator.
I've not heard of that.
Yeah, that was. I mean, it's not a pixel game, but it is a narrative game, and it's really fun. It's got a nice little kind of music component to it that you can kind of bounce around as you're playing it, and I did enjoy that. I'd be hard pressed for a lot of people to think it's a point and click adventure game. I think at its core, though, it is.
Yeah, when I was thinking earlier about point and clicks that I'd seen recently at shows, I was thinking of this little pixel point and click called I Does Not Exist, which I don't think is out yet, but it's been in a lot of shows.
Yeah,
It's very much a mystery of like, oh, you're kind of in this strange environment with this very dreamlike environment with kind of these random objects, this little forest and a talking mushroom, and you're trying to get through a door and finding the things you need to get through the door. But the turn it takes when you figure out why you're trying to get through the door and what's going on with that was very interesting. And that was one that mechanically was very familiar to me, but story-wise was doing something I haven't seen really in games in quite that manner at all. So yeah, I mean, it's incredible that there's still room for so much inventiveness in this genre that's just been chugging along for a very long time. But then I guess books are still being inventive, and we've been writing those for thousands of years. So maybe I shouldn't be surprised.
But I mean, when was the last time you read a book where you went, "Wow, that's revolutionary"? I'd never seen a novel do what that novel did. I think that's much rarer than the kind of games. And I think movies are the same way. It's like you saw a lot of really revolutionary movies and storytelling and the way they were shot, and now they just kind of all look the same to me when I'm watching movies. And I think it's the maturing of any art form or technology just kind of leads to this like kind of comfort level of things.
Do you think games are getting there too then?
I don't think they're there, but they will certainly get there.
Is that a bad thing?
It is. Like, I used to love to go to movies, and I don't really enjoy movies these days because there was a time when movies were doing lots of really interesting things, and I don't see as much of that today with movies. So I think it can be a bad thing. I think there will always be standouts every now and then, but it doesn't feel like there's as much of that stuff as there used to be.
What was the last movie you really enjoyed?
Oh, wow.
Oh boy.
The last, well, I think current movie, probably.
Any movie. The last one you remember really enjoying. Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, the last movie that I really liked was I watched Good Will Hunting, which I'd seen before, right?
I see.
But, I love that movie. That's a really, really good movie. And I think that was probably the last one that I've watched that I just really, really, enjoyed. Like, I just got done watching American Hustle, which came out a little while ago, and it's like, again, it didn't really show me anything new and super interesting. So it was kind of an movie.
Oh, okay. Are there any games recently you really enjoyed?
Oh, well, like I said, I really enjoyed South of the Circle. I really liked that. I was a little bit torn on it because I thought it was a very, very interesting story. It was a very interesting narrative. I wish I had more agency as a player because I did kind of feel like I was just moving down this one track and I didn't have a lot of chance to really kind of interact with and form the story in a way. But I think they did a really good job of the narrative of the thing, and I really liked the art a lot on that one. It's probably the last game that I've played, actually. No, that's not true. I just got done playing Storytelling.
Oh, what's that?
It's not a narrative game in the classic sense, but you're kind of given almost this fairy tale description, and then you have to reorganize these panels.
Yeah, I have a code for that. I need to play that.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's like tell a romantic story, and you have to put the pieces in the right places to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Jen and I played that, and we just loved it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Where do you sit on the spectrum now? Like, are you wanting to, like, when you approach whatever it is you're working on next, are you like, I need to be inventive, I need to do something that's going to surprise people, or are you like comfortable making things that are comfortable?
I like to make things that interest me, and maybe they interest other people, maybe they don't. Like the game that I'm currently working on is a little RPG game, right? It's an action game where you go around and you shoot stuff and blow stuff up, and that is kind of what I want to make right now. It's not a narrative game. There's no deep story going on with the whole thing. It's just about blowing crap up.
Yeah, but I mean that's pretty different from a lot of your previous work, like even the stuff we haven't mentioned on this call.
But it is kind of what I play in a lot of ways. Like I love Nuclear Throne. I really like that game a lot, and so I kind of it's like I look at these kind of short actiony type games almost as a palate cleaner. It's like I do the long narrative stuff, and then I'm gonna go blow some stuff up for a while, and then I'm ready to kind of go back to narrative stuff.
Yeah. Does it feel nice to be out of your comfort zone a little bit then?
Yeah, I do like it. Yeah, I do like doing that stuff.
You're not to bring the toil of the passing years back into it again. But I mean, I don't know, you're kind of at a point where you've made a lot of things over the years, and I don't know, you have maybe, I guess, an opportunity to sort of think about like what legacy you're leaving on the games industry. Is that ever something you think about?
No, I never think about that.
Let's go back into not wanting to introduce yourself.
I mean, some people ask me about that and assume that it must be weighing heavily on me. It's like, what's my legacy? And I don't really think about that.
Well, I guess, I mean, maybe to put it in any other terms, like, do you care at all about leaving anything behind, like that people might learn from or grow from or build on, I guess?
I think things like doing Maniac Mansion and really kind of pioneering the whole point and click thing is I'm really proud of that. That really spawned this entire genre of game. Will I be remembered for it? Probably not. But I am proud of it. I am extremely proud of the games that I did at Humongous Entertainment, doing those adventure games for kids. It's probably more proud of that stuff than anything else I've ever done in my career. And I come across a lot of people who played those games when they were kids. Now they're adults and they play those games as kids, and that's very heartening for me. It's like I love to see that those games kind of got them into gaming, and a lot of what we were trying to do with those games, building actual real adventure games for kids, it really did kind of resonate with a lot of kids and a lot of people. And it's really fun to see people who grew up playing Pajama Sam or Freddy Fish, who are now introducing it to their kids in the same way that they did with Return to Monkey Island, that they play Return to Monkey Island with their kids. And I'm very proud of that, right? I'm very glad that I did that and I influenced so many people. But will I be remembered for any of that stuff? Probably not.
Yeah, I think I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think kids games tend to be less glamorous to talk about in situations like this, but they are really formative. I mean, I didn't play like Pajama Sam or anything like that growing up, but I did play like a lot of kids computer games. And when I think about the origins of why I'm into gaming now and how I got here, it's probably because I was playing Treasure Cove or something years and years and years ago. Exactly. And so like in that respect, you've probably touched a lot of lives in like very formative years for people. And yeah, I think you're right to be proud of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think about like the Humongous Entertainment games and just how many copies of those games we sold. Yeah. Right. I mean, we sold like over 20 million copies of those games, which just dwarfs what I sold with Monkey Island or Maniac Mansion or any of those other things. So those games touch a lot more people than the stuff I'm currently working on. And I think that's one of the reasons I am just so proud of those games.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you have quite a bit to be proud of, as we just barely scratched the surface of today. I think we're coming up close to the amount of time we have. So
and here's my dog.
And the dog has arrived just in time to say goodbye. Who's the puppy?
Pap.
Pap?
P-E-P, Pap.
Oh, hi, baby. Well, Ron, thank you so much for your time today. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. LudoNarraCon, folks. Go enjoy that. I don't have a fancy sign off.
Well, thanks a lot.
Thanks.